Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at what the high elo players are playing in this patch, which champions are being picked the most right now in master tier and above, and this should give you a pretty good idea of which champions are the best this patch if mastered. If pro players and high elo players are playing these champions the most right now, then if you put time into them and you know how to play them well, then they're going to be the best champions you can play in 7.19. So that being said guys, let's get started. So we're going to start off down in the support role for this patch, and it's pretty much just the land of ardent sensors right now. Down in the bot lane, we've got Sona, Rakan, and Lulu being the three most picked right now in the higher elos, and then Janna's a pick to where she's banned like 60 or 70% of the time right now, and even though she's not the most picked in this patch, if there were no bans at all and you couldn't ban a champion, then I'm pretty sure Janna's play rate would be quite a bit higher. So I am still going to include certain champions that also do have a very high ban rate in this video. So for Sona and Rakan, they're both sitting at above 63% win rates for this patch, and then you got Lulu sitting at a 46%. Now there's a few different reasons I think to why this is and to why Sona and Rakan are a little bit stronger than Lulu right now, and it's mainly because Lulu's inability to proc Ardent Sensor on more than one target in a team fight is probably what's bringing her down a little bit in power. Sona has the ability to proc Ardent Sensor on all 5 of her teammates whenever she uses her W. Rakan can proc it on 2 of his teammates if he wants to with his shield, and Lulu can only proc it whenever her shield is off cooldown. So it does add for a lot more damage, like when you're playing Sona and you get that shield on everyone and the heal on everyone, and when you're playing Lulu, you will be losing out on a little bit more damage from that Ardent Sensor during team fights. And then for the AD carries in this patch, the 3 most picked are Tristana, Xayah, and Caitlyn. So all 3 of these AD carries are pretty safe AD carry picks. Tristana has a gap closer, Xayah's got her invulnerability with her ultimate, Caitlyn's also got a gap closer, so they fit pretty nicely into this meta right now of a lot of dive champions and a lot of hard engaged champions being played. They also synergize very nicely with the Ardent Sensor supports. Someone like a Tristana, when you're pairing her up with a Sona or just any Ardent Sensor support, you've got the mobility from the Tristana, you've got like the peel from someone like a Sona, and it's just so obnoxious to play against an Ardent Sensor Tristana during a mid to late game team fight, because if she's playing the team fight out correctly, you're just not going to be able to reach her with her range and with her self peel and her gap closers. So if you're a good player of any of these 3 AD carries in this patch right now, it's going to be very easy for you to carry with them in 7.19. And then the Caitlyn changes in this patch turned out to be pretty nice for her. Originally, I thought that the nerfs she was getting to her early game would kind of hurt her identity and it would bring her out of the meta, or she just wouldn't come back into the meta, but it turns out that the buffs she got to compensate for those early game changes were enough to just make her a pretty strong pick in 7.19. She does have the ability to hit the towers with her headshot now, so it makes her tower pushing ability a lot stronger, and her mid to late game is even better now in 7.19. So along with Tristana, if you're pairing her up with like these Ardent Sensor supports, you've got the gap closer with Caitlyn, you've got the long range, and it's just so hard to reach these AD carry targets during team fights. Now for the mid lane in this patch, Orianna, Caston, Veigar, and then I also want to mention Azir. Azir isn't being picked as much as these 3 above him, but he's still a champion that's doing very well, at least compared to previous patches. In the higher elos, he's sitting at a 58% win rate right now, which is really good. 58% win rate means he's probably a little bit too strong if you know how to play him well. So I would recommend, if you are an Azir player or you want to pick up the champion in this patch, if you put the time into him right now, then he's definitely worth playing in 7.19. So for these other 3 picks right now, Orianna just seems to never fall out of the meta. She's just got a great kit overall, and unless they do nerf her super hard, I feel like she's always going to be a pretty meta champion. Her kit is just very versatile in the sense that she's got a shield, she's got great team fighting ability, she's got great wave clear in her kit. She's basically got everything you want for a mage, so as long as you can just be able to line up your shockwaves well in team fights and you can hit that consistently, then you're going to have pretty good success success on Orianna. For Kassadin, you can pretty much pick this guy into any AP mage in this patch and you're gonna do pretty well. He does struggle a little bit in the early game, pre-6. He doesn't have the ability to really influence the map too much, and he's gonna get shoved in certain matchups, but once you do at level 6 as Kassadin, you unlock your roaming potential and you could just really start to either pressure your lane if you are going up against an enemy mid laner that is skill shot reliant, or you can just look to go for roams with your teleport or just with your rift walk, and you could just start to take over a game once you do hit level 6. Your 2 to 3 item power spike is insane as well, so he's pretty much a ticking time bomb. If you get past the early game, then you're going to do very well on the champion. And then as for Veigar, I just think he's the better version of Syndra now in this patch. He's that press R to win champion, and he's just a very strong pick, a very underrated pick in my opinion in 7.19. I think I've played around 9 or 10 games on Veigar. I've only lost 1 game, and the reason to why this pick is so strong is because he did get that buff to his W. It's on a 2 or 3 second cooldown come the mid to late game, but I don't think that's the only reason to why he's gotten stronger. I think the playstyle of this champion has changed over the past few patches, and what a lot of people are doing now on the pick is they're rushing Moby boots and they're just running around the map in the early game looking for roams and looking for picks with his stun, and this is just a really good way to snowball the early game out of control. During the mid game, you can also be running around with those Moby boots looking for picks with your E, and if the enemies don't have flash up, your E just lasts for such a long duration that as long as your team is there to follow up, you're going to be able to burst down that champion that gets caught in your cage. I just think he's the better version of Syndra now in 7.19. He's that press R to win champion. Your damage is going to be very consistent on him during mid to late game team fights, and you can pretty much one shot whoever you want or whichever squishy target you want come the mid to late game. So I think he's a pretty consistent pick as long as you can get past your early game. As long as you don't die multiple times in the early game as Veigar, then you're going to have great success on him in this patch. If we move over to the jungle now, I think this is one of the only times I've made one of these videos to where Lee Sin, Elise, and Gragas aren't 3 of the most picked. Right now, it's Jarvan, Rek'Sai, and Sejuani that are being highly contested in the higher elos. So for Jarvan, Rek'Sai, and Sej, they're just all very versatile picks. You can pretty much blind pick all of these junglers right now, and you can play them to what your team needs. So for example, Jarvan, you can play the pick, you can play him full tank if you need to, you can play him assassin, you can go a mix, you can go bruiser Jarvan, and you can kind of do the same thing on Rek'Sai as well. Both of these 2 junglers have very strong early games as well, so they're just better versions right now of a pick like Lee Sin. Lee Sin does fall off super hard in the late game, whereas someone like Jarvan is always going to be useful in the mid to late game, and he's also going to have the potential to have a great early game as well. And then for Sejuani, I think she's just the best jungler still in 7.19. As you can see there, she's got a 63% win rate in the higher elos, and that's really not much of a surprise, to be honest. I think the pick is just way too strong in the sense that her crowd control that she provides during team fights and just overall is way too much. She's got a point and click stun in her kit that is just very easy to proc, and it just makes her ability to snowball melee lanes in the early game extremely easy to do. If you're playing with someone like a Riven top lane who is picked a lot in the higher elos, then it's just so easy to camp that lane. Riven just goes in, stuns the enemy, she gets a few autos off, Sejuani hits the stun, and you just continually rinse and repeat that. You snowball the Riven out of control, and you just end up scaling super hard into the late game with Sejuani. So I just think the pick right now is not very risky at all. It's very low risk, high reward. So overall, she's a very strong jungler for 7.19. And then to round out the video here, for the top lane, the 5 most picked for top lane, and the reason I'm doing 5 is because the first 2 here are pretty much always played a lot in the higher elos in Jace and Riven, and then the 3 most picked after that are Camille, Gnar, and Fiora. So Jace and Riven, I'm not going to talk about them too much, mainly because they're just picks that if you put a lot of time into them, you're going to have great success on them. They've both got 57% win rates right now in the higher ranks, and just their ability to snowball the early game out of control and just take their lead and extend that around the map, or just keep pressuring the enemy laner to the point where they're completely useless, is very easy to do on these picks if you have experience on them. And then for Camille, Gnar, and Fiora, I think they're just very solid, consistent top lane carry picks for 7.19. With the changes to Bramble Vest in this patch, it does mean that those tank top laners like Cho'Gath and Maokai are going to have a little bit of a harder time dealing with these picks in this patch. I especially think that Fiora against someone like a Cho'Gath or a Maokai or even a Camille can do very well in 7.19. With the Fiora buffs in 7.18 and then with the Bramble Vest nerfs in 7.19, I think if you can play good Fiora right now, then she is one of the best carry top lane picks for 7.19. So that is going to be all for this video. These are the picks in 7.19 that if you have put the time into them in the past, or if you put the time into them in this patch, then you are going to notice they are going to be the strongest picks right now for 7.19, and they are going to have a great influence on the game. So that being said, guys, if you did enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already, and I will see you in my next video.